The 13 treasures of the island of Britain are a series of items in late medieval Welsh tradition. Lists of the items appear in texts dating to the 15th and 16th centuries. Most of the items are placed in the Hen Ogledd or Old North, the Brittonic-speaking parts of what is now southern Scotland and northern England. Some early manuscripts refer to the whole list specifically as treasures that were in the north. The number of treasures is always given as 13, but some later versions list different items, replacing or combining entries to maintain the number. Later versions also supplement the plain list with explanatory comments about each treasure. List. The various treasures include vessels or utensils for food and drink, objects relating to weaponry and to transport, clothing and still other items. The standard version of the list includes the following treasures. 1. White hilt, the sword of Arthur Kyle. If a well-born man drew it himself, it burst into flame from its hilt to its tip, and everyone who used to ask for it would receive, but because of this peculiarity everyone used to reject it, and therefore he was called Arthur the Generous. 2. The Hamper of Garen. Here, food for 1 man would be put in it, and when it was opened, food for 100 men would be found in it. 3. The Horn of Bran. Gail from the north. Whatever drink might be wished for was found in it. 4. The Chariot of Morgan. If a man went in it, he might wish to be wherever he would, and he would be there quickly. 5. The Halter of Clyde, which was fixed to a staple at the foot of his bed. Whatever horse he might wish for, he would find in the halter. 6. The Knife of Lawford Farchog, which would serve for 24 men to eat at table. 7. The Cauldron of Dyrnch the Giant. If meat for a coward were put in it to boil, it would never boil, but if meat for a brave man were put in it, it would boil quickly. 8. The Whetstone of Todd. If a brave man sharpened his sword on the whetstone, then the sword would certainly kill any man from whom it drew blood. If a cowardly man used the whetstone, though, his sword would refuse to draw blood at all. 9. The Coat of Padan Basrud. If a well-born man put it on, it would be the right size for him. If a churl, it would not go upon him. 10. 11. The Crock and the Dish of Regened the Cleric. Whatever food might be wished for in them, it would be found. 12. The Chessboard of Gwendiluapsedio. If the pieces were set, they would play by themselves. The board was of gold, and the men of silver. 13. The Mantle of Arthur in Cornwall. Whoever was under it could not be seen, and he could see everyone. 14 15ths. Later lists also include 2 additional treasures, the Mantle of Tegra, and a loon's stone and ring. Where these appear, one of the other treasures is dropped and the Crock and the Dish of Regened the Cleric are counted as one item. The new items come from literary, rather than traditional, material. The mantle comes from a version of the Caradoc story, while a loon's stone and ring come from the prose tale Orwain, or the Lady of the Fountain. Description. Some of the magical objects listed can be shown to have earlier origins in Welsh narrative tradition. Items 1, 2 and 7, for instance, are also described in the Middle Welsh tale Cauldron, in which Ysbaddaden the Giant gives King Arthur's cousin Culture a list of impossible tasks which he has to complete in order to win the hand of Olwen, the giant's daughter. Dynwen, the sword of Arthur Kyle. The Dynwen is said to be a powerful sword belonging to Arthur Kyle, one of the 3 generous men of Britain mentioned in the Welsh triads. When drawn by a worthy or well-born man, the entire blade would blaze with fire. Arthur was never reluctant to hand the weapon to anyone, hence his nickname Kyle the Generous, but the recipients, as soon as they had learned of its peculiar properties, always rejected the sword. The Hamper of Garen. Here, it is told that Garen here possessed a hamper which would multiply food. If one was to put food for 1 man in the basket and open it again, the food was found to be increased 100-fold. The Horn of Bran Gail. The Horn of Bran Gael from the north is said to have possessed the magical property of ensuring that whatever drink might be wished for was found in it. Marginal notes to the text in Penniarth MS 147 elaborate on this brief entry by saying that Mervyn had approached the kings and lords of Britain to request the treasures. They consented on the condition that he obtained the Horn of Bran Gael, supposing that the task would be impossible to fulfill. However, Mervyn somehow succeeded to obtain the drinking horn and so received the other treasures as well. He took his hoard to the glass house, where it would remain forever, tracing the prior history of the horn to the Greek mythological past. The same notes tell that Hercules had removed the horn from the head of the centaur he had slain, whose wife then killed the hero in bloody revenge. The discrepancy between Bran's nickname and the special property of the enchanted horn appears to be explained by the Welsh poet Hen Ogledd, who lived in the mid-15th century and was therefore contemporary with the earliest attestations of the Trihlwsrdddleg. He relates that Bran Gael was a northern nobleman, whom Taliesin transformed into a man superior to the Trihyl, i.e., the three most generous men in Britain according to one of the Welsh triads. Later bards to allude to the treasure include Tydir Aladdin Iorwerth Finglewood. The identity of Bran Gael is uncertain. His northern background, which is usually described in general terms, is specified in one place elsewhere. A 16th-century node written by the scribe Gruffydd Hiraethog identifies Bran as the son of one Emelier, which appears to refer to the Bran son of Imelian who is depicted in the Clywach Hen cycle of poems as an opponent of the kings of Reged. The latter has also been equated with the Bran fighting at Kinwood in the poem Gwachin Tudfulk, possibly against Orwain of Reged. The Chariot of Morgan Winfor. The chariot belonging to Morgan Winfor is described as a magical vehicle which would quickly reach whatever destination one might wish to go to. The Halter of Clyde belonged to Clyde It was fixed to a staple at the foot of his bed. Whatever horse he might wish for, he would find in the halter. The Halter of Clyde was also called the handy halter, for it summons fine horses. The knife of Lawfreded the horseman, Lawfreded Farchog, or Barforce the bearded, in other manuscripts, is said to have owned a knife which would serve for a company of 24 men at the dinner table. The Cauldron of Dyrnch the Giant. The Cauldron of Dyrnch the Giant is said to discriminate between cowards and brave men. Whereas it would not boil meat for a coward, it would boil quickly if that meat belonged to a brave man. The description probably goes back to a story similar to that found in the Middle Welsh tale Culchach Olwen, in which the Cauldron of Dyfnach the Irishman, steward to Odger son of Aedd, King of Ireland, is among the anawethu which Culch is required to obtain for the wedding banquet. King Arthur requests the cauldron from King Odger, but Dyfnach refuses to give up his prized possession. Arthur goes to visit Dyfnach in Ireland, accompanied by a small party, and is received at his house. But when Dyfnach refuses to answer Arthur's request a second time, Bedwyr seizes the cauldron and entrusts it to one of Arthur's servants, who is to carry the load on his back. In a single sweep with the sword called Caledfulk, Lenliaug the Irishman kills off Dyfnach and all his men. A confrontation with Irish forces ensues, but Arthur and his men fight them off. They board the ship Prydwen and, taking with them the cauldron loaded with the spoils of war, return to Britain. In Culch, Dyfnach's cauldron is not attributed with any special power. However, the earlier poem Prywnw WFN, refers to an adventure by Arthur and his men to obtain a cauldron with magical properties equivalent to the one in the lists of the 13 treasures. In this poem, the owner of the cauldron is not an Irish lord but the king of ANNWN, the Welsh otherworld, suggesting that the version of the story in Culch is a later attempt to euhemerize an older tale. Devenich's name, which derives from Irish Dea Gurach and exhibits no literary provenance, may have been selected by the author of Culch ac Olwen to emphasize the Irish setting of his story. Although Deanch is not himself described as an Irishman, it is probable that his name goes back to Devenich. The extant manuscripts of THLWSRDDEG also present such variant spellings as Deanog and Tinnog, without the Irish-sounding ending. But on balance, these are best explained as Welsh approximations of a foreign name. The whetstone of Todd Untitled sharpens the blade of a fine warrior. It shall draw blood from any enemy of its user if its user be brave. If its user shall be cowardly, then the blade shall not be sharpened and draw no blood whatsoever. The coat of Padan base Rud. Padan's coat perfectly fits any brave man, will not fit cowards. The crock and dish of Regened Gail Haig belonged to Regened the cleric. Whatever food might be wished for in them, it would be found on them. Chessboard of Gwendolo Apsidio. Rather large chessboard with pieces of silver and crystal and the board made of gold. The pieces only play by themselves if all the pieces are set up correctly. The Mantle of Arthur in Cornwall. King Arthur's leather mantle is said to make anyone underneath it invisible, though able to see out. This item is known from two other sources, the prose tales Culch Olwen and the Dream of Ronabwe. A very similar mantle also appears in the second branch of the Mabinogi, in which it is used by Caswallon to assassinate the 7 stewards left behind by Bran the Blessed and usurp the throne. In Culch, Arthur's mantle is included in the list of the only things Arthur will not give to the protagonist Culch, but it is not named specifically or otherwise described. However, the names of several of the other items contain the element Gwyn, meaning white, sacred, blessed, suggesting otherworldly connections for the whole list. In the Dream of Ronabwe, the mantle is specifically named Gwen and has properties analogous to those given in the lists of the 13 treasures, though here it is those on top of the mantle who are made invisible. The Mantle of Tegra. Goldbreast Tegra. Goldbreast was a Welsh heroine. Her mantle would not serve for any woman who had violated her marriage or her virginity. It would reach to the ground when worn by a faithful woman but would only hang down to the lap of an unfaithful wife. The stone and ring of Elune the Fortunate One might describe it as a cloak of invisibility. It's said that Merlin once possessed this item for a while.